Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Post-Brexit Transition Updates. This will give you an update on the EU and UK food industry supply chains, and we'll also introduce a new product, which is Realise. To enjoy this webinar the best, please shut down any other apps you may have running. And if you do have any sound issues, F5 to refresh your screen should help with that issue. So without further ado, we shall get started. Our presenters will actually introduce themselves before we get going. The agenda today will be our introductions, followed by Realise, followed by changes to regulatory imports and exports for animals, and then an introduction to our e-customs. So first up is Jeremy.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Jeremy Chamberlain, and I'm the Global Food Certification Manager at SGS, and I'm responsible for looking after food supply chain audits across our global operation with over 1,000 auditors and delivering in excess of 25,000 audits in over 160 countries a year.
Good morning, everybody. Lovely to be able to join you this morning. My name is Lorraine Wilford. I'm a Principal Advisor at SGS Ashby. I've got over 30 years regulatory experience, majority of that in the public sector, working in local authorities. But I've been working as a regulatory advisor for 6 years now, providing advice to a range of customers from small retailers and manufacturers right up to national retailers and manufacturers. Mark, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Mark Andrews. I'm Senior Sales Manager for e-customs services and product conformity assessment services in the UK, and I'll be talking to you today introducing the range of services offered by e-customs. I'll now hand over to Jeremy to kick things off.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and hello, everyone. I have two objectives for you in our brief time together today. First, to give you an overview of why food safety culture is a key topic in the food industry and why it matters to the logistics industry today. And secondly, to also give an insight into our Realise winning food safety culture service that can give you a measurement on the maturity of your culture and, more importantly, give actionable evidence on how you can work to improve it. And although I'm using the word food safety, this is commonly referred to as product safety for companies supporting the food industry, such as packaging suppliers, agents, brokers, storage and distribution providers. And in fact, many local authorities actually require cold stores to register the environmental health as actual food facilities. And since the 1990s, food manufacturers have had to comply with a number of requirements, mostly coming from the retailers, which then transformed into audit standards such as the BRC and FSSC. And to have consistency between these different standards, the Global Food Safety Initiative was formed in 2000 to create a common benchmark for safe food production globally. And it begins at the farm level right through to the actual retail stores themselves. For a food manufacturer to sell to a retailer nowadays, they will need to have one of these certificates from a GFSI benchmark scheme. And as a logistics company is providing a service for these food manufacturers, I'd expect you've had probably lengthy questionnaires to complete from these food manufacturers, and some may have also required you to get a certification audit to something like the BRC storage and distribution standard, which itself is GFSI benchmarked. So in the latest benchmark in 2020, the Global Food Safety Initiative indicated a requirement for a food safety culture. So I thought I would begin with a statement from the GFSI on their paper, which they produced in 2020, A Culture of Food Safety. So it reads, a culture draws its power from the unspoken and intuitive, from the simple observation and from beliefs as fundamental as this is the right thing to do, and we would never do this. Rules state facts and culture lives through the human experience. And perhaps a simpler version of this is often said is, would the employees do what they're supposed to do if no one is watching? You will have invested a significant amount of time and money in training your employees to follow the correct procedures. When things get busy and the pressure is on, will they still maintain those standards, or would they be tempted to cut some corners to make their life a little easier? Like when splitting a pallet, would they stack a few spare boxes on the floor, or would they actually go get another pallet? Okay, next slide, please. So what does the GFSI benchmark for food safety culture say? So you can see there the evidence of senior management's commitment to establish, implement, maintain, and continuously improve the food safety management system shall be provided and include elements of food safety culture consisting as a minimum of communication about food safety policies and responsibilities, training, employee feedback on food safety issues, and performance measurement. So this requirement was published in January 2020, and all benchmarked schemes have to incorporate into the standard. For example, the BRC storage and distribution standard has just been updated to include a requirement for product safety culture and will be included at the next round of audits. If we have the next slide, please. So the Codex was created back in '69 by the World Health Organization and the UN, and basically sets a standard for international trade relating to food items, including the minimum or maximum pesticide residues in foods, but it also created the general principles of food hygiene back in 1969. And in 2020, for the first time, it was reviewed for 17 years. And of course, it was updated to include food safety culture. And it has a lot of details about expectations of food safety culture, stating it is fundamental to successful functioning. And again, key elements here included not only the senior management commitment, but the commitment of all personnel, leadership to set direction with personnel, all employees to have an awareness of the importance of food hygiene, clear communication of personnel, especially in expectations and failures, and finally to maintain sufficient resources for a system to function. As Codex requirements form the foundation of international trade and standards, its requirements always work their way through into legislation. As you can see, the UK is already implementing, the EU is already implementing new legislation on the inclusion of food safety culture. And this trend is continuing around the world, with the USA and Australia also recently announcing that they'll be including it within legislation too. Can I have the next slide? So the culture of concept operating within a business has been around for some time in the UK. Some of you may remember the outbreak of E. coli 0157 back in 2005, which impacted many school children. The investigation report of this was published in 2009 and criticised the local enforcement authorities for having a soft touch on what was evident that the owner of the facility had deliberately misled and lied to the inspectors. And this was followed up with research and various papers being published trying to understand why food handlers choose not to implement known hygiene practices, and also trying to predict employees' behaviour. And such studies have often indicated that some aspects of behaviour relate to the individual. Over 40% of this may be related to the prevailing organisational structure of the company. In 2012, the UK Food Standards Agency issued a diagnostic toolkit for their inspectors to identify the different types of company culture, which confirm a basis on how often they're visited, and also to decide upon if prosecution is necessary for breaches. So you can see there at the bottom or at the top of the list there, the calculative non-compliers. These are the companies that are intentionally breaching regulations for the sake of financial gain and disputing or disregarding risk to people, right through to the leaders there, where their safety is critical and visible leadership is continuous. Okay, if I can have the next slide. So now it's been incorporated into all these various different requirements. We've launched our food safety culture product, and it's an assessment developed by technical food experts and occupational psychologists to measure product safety culture. And it gains an insight and actionable intelligence that can be used to continuously improve the culture and will help comply with all the various legislation and requirements coming through. In fact, the next slide. And we've designed it around the GFSI white paper and what they've picked and identified as the key dimensions and elements of food safety culture. And we've created a separate version of our food safety culture assessments, especially for logistics companies. While some of the core elements of core principles are the same, the understanding of product safety is different for logistic companies. Topics like spillages, protecting loads, and stacking heights are included in the assessment, for example. But the 4 key pillars of our assessment are vision. So does the vision define the desired culture? Empowerment, are employees empowered to deliver that culture? Systems, do the systems in place support this vision? And trust, do the employees believe and trust in this vision? Okay, if I have the next slide, please. So each of these pillars is made up of 5 individual elements, and each of these elements we're trying to answer an overriding question. So you can see there, horizon is the company planning for the future, through to values, mission, direction, so our direction and milestone set, and messaging is the vision clearly messaged. So you can see there's lots of points here about communication. So this is about setting the vision and communicating that vision clearly to the employees. If we have the next slide, please. So the next key pillar for us is empowerment. So this is about engaging with the employees. So are the employees actually stakeholders in that vision? Are employees actually updated on progress towards that vision? The next 2 are linked together. So this covers sort of training and understanding. So learning, first of all, is training clear and relevant to the delivery and delivered at the right frequency. How is that training actually conducted? Are people just given a procedure to read and expected to sign it, or are they actually engaged in that training? And through that training, we then look at understanding. So do the employees actually understood what they've actually been trained in and what the importance of food safety measurements and controls are? Then the final point there, recognition, and this is always important within a culture. Do the employees get recognized for doing the right things? If they put their hand up and said, look, I've got a concern here, would they be listened to? Would action be taken, or would they be recriminated against? And that's what we're trying to understand in that particular point. So then if you move on to the next one. So here it's systems. So this is kind of like how the company organizes itself, how the systems work. So target set. Are the targets set actually relevant to the vision? So here we're trying to understand, is product out the door more important than actually getting a safe product out the door? Then we look into documentation. So are they clear, accessible in the right languages? Standards, are the site facilities maintained to the correct standard? Then we look at accountability. So do the actual individual employees understand their own responsibilities, and how is that performance measured? So if we move on to the next slide, please. So this is the final pillar here, trust. So the first 2 are about understanding how the company responds to crisis, complaints. So through that agility, how does the company adapt and evolve to the changing environment? And then the second part there, course correction. So does the company problem solve? So is it understanding the root cause of when it has issues? Does it put in sustainable solutions to prevent them from happening again? The final 3 points here are about personnel and their interactions. So first of all, leadership. So do the leadership actually lead by example? So when the senior manager comes into a warehouse, do they actually follow the guidelines they're supposed to do, that they're expecting all of their employees to do? Then the following 2, peer actions. So do fellow employees actually follow all the procedures they're supposed to do? And then finally, personal actions. Do the individual actually follow the actions that they're supposed to do? And also, we also ask, are they actually given enough time to conduct the actions that they're supposed to do? So if you can move on to the next slide. So how is it structured? How do we deliver this? Well, first of all, the number of employees we need this assessment to be completed upon depends on the number of employees within the business. If a business is under 30 employees, then we need every employee to complete the assessment. If a site has got over 300 employees, we're only looking for around 50% of the employees to actually complete the assessment. And what we do is we focus these questions on 3 different levels of operators. So first is the sort of the operator. So these are the people who are on that warehouse floor. They're the people who are making the magic happen. They're making things go from A to B. Then the next level is a supervisor. So these are often kind of on the shop floor, and they're responsible for managing the operators. And then we have the leadership, and they're based in the office, but they're managing the supervisor base. And obviously some of the questions we ask to a manager or leadership will be very different from what we asked to an operator who are actually on the shop floor. And what we've done is we've got statement-based questions, which are very easy to understand. We have a reading age of our questions of about an 8 to 9 year old. To put that in context, the reading age of a tabloid in the UK here is about a 7 to 8 year old. And what we have behind each of those elements is we have a bank of questions. And these questions are randomized and delivered to each person. So 2 people can be sat by side taking this assessment and they'll get completely different questions. Now, each employee has 20 questions to answer, and a typical engagement time is around 15 minutes. And currently our survey is available in over 25 languages. And finally, how is it actually delivered? So we give you each site 3 different links into an online system that can be accessed via computer, laptop, tablet, smartphone, and basically you click on the link and you just complete the assessment. It's a drop down against each statement of how much you agree or disagree, and there's also some frequency-based questions there. Now, the assessment, to make it valuable, is 100% anonymous, so all we can trace is what level of employees answered the question and which company has actually answered it. If I can have the next slide, please. So the output of the assessment is in the standard format. You get a PDF report that gives the overall score, and it can also give the score against each individual pillar and each of those 20 individual elements. And as you continue through the program, then you'll get a successive benchmarking against your performance and other companies that are similar. And in with the report, there comes many hints and tips on how you can identify and improve certain areas of your food safety culture going forward. There's also a premium offering, which gives an online access into a dashboard, and as well as the pillars and the 20 individual elements, you can also actually drill down into the scores by the individual personnel levels, ranging from, so you can look at how the operators are scored differently to the senior leadership on the site. And if I can have the last slide, please. So you can see there's been a lot of movement on food safety culture since 2020, and this will continue to trickle down from the food manufacturers to the industries that actually support them, like logistics companies. And of course, our old friend, Pete Drucker, he always says, and if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Okay, so thanks for listening, and I'll now hand over to Lorraine for her section on products of animal origin.
Thanks, Jeremy. That's really interesting. I enjoyed that. I hope you all did. Now for something slightly different. What I'm going to do this morning is just run through very quickly rules around imports and exports for products of animal origin, looking in particular at composite products. Can I have the next slide, please? All I've done in the first slide is really split out the main steps for imports and exports, and I'm sure that some of the things on there you'll already be familiar with, and it's perhaps just the latter points that I'd like to focus on today, because those are the areas where there has been some changes. But just very quickly, obviously, once that the UK became a third country, there was no longer that free movement of goods. So there was, there's a raft of conditions and rules that apply. So the first one being registration as an economic operator, and all goods, including foods, would have to have the correct commodity code and the correct customs declarations applied to them. In addition to that, some food category establishments need to be specifically approved for import or exports. Some categories of food need to enter via an official border control post and must also be pre-notified. And the other main requirement is to do with the certification. So that may be an export health certificate, it could be a phytosanitary, could be a certificate of conformity, and there's now also the private attestation for EU imports. And again, the final thing is obviously those identity and physical checks that need to occur at the BCPs, the border control posts. Next slide, please. So the first thing is the approved establishments, something that was already in place for imports into the EU even prior to Brexit, but obviously rules have changed slightly in that there's now the two lists are now sort of separating, and that you still have that list of establishments for EU imports and Obviously, there's a separate list for GB. Facilities will still be the same, because what happened was all of the legislation, and including the approved establishment legislation, was transferred over on the 1st of January into UK retained legislation. So it would perhaps only be going forward that we'll perhaps see any divergence from, whether it's the list or the legislation. There are some links, and you can find the list of establishments both on the EU site and also the GB site. Obviously, those are constantly updated, but that is something that you can check on. Next slide, please. So this morning, I really thought it was worth looking specifically at the products of animal origin, not live animals as such, but actual products. So what I mean by that is the different categories of food products. So you've got meat, including your fresh meat and meat products, meat preparations, eggs and egg products, dairy products, milk and milk products, but also things that you may not think about. So things like honey, gelatin products. And the final category where we've seen the most of the changes, which are the composite products, which contain some of those ingredients. And I don't know whether any of you are involved in animal feed businesses, but animal feed is also included in the requirements for products of animal origin. Next slide, please. So the major requirement it relates to, in relation to products of animal origin, is that generally products of animal origin must be accompanied by an export health certificate. And the export health certificate is just that official document which just confirms that your food meets the health requirements of whatever your destination country is, whether that is destination to the UK or destination to an EU country. The UK government website has some certificate finders and has the full list of certificates. You do need a separate certificate for the specific category, so there isn't just a catch-all certificate. There's a huge raft of different certificates, and those are set out in the different pieces of legislation. The certificate itself is issued by the competent officer in whatever the exporting country is. Generally, that would be a vet officer that would sign that certificate. And as you're probably all aware, the implementation dates for the sanitary checks and the EHC requirements for imports into GB were pushed back, and we are now looking at a date of various dates, because it will be phased in as from the 1st of October this year, running into 2022. Next slide, please. So as I've said, there are different certificates for each category of product of animal origin. So there's different ones for fresh meats, for fishery products, dairy products, composite products. And as I've already said, there are templates available which you can use. You don't have to use them, you can use your own, as long as that required information is actually on there. And as I said, there are very good certificate finders on the .gov website. Next slide, please. So the composite products, which is certainly the area, when I look back over the last 12 months, has been the area where most of the businesses who've come to us, who we've offered advice to and provided advice to, have asked about. This is the area that generally causes, the most confusion. It's perhaps the most difficult to sort of work through. So a composite product it's a foodstuff that contains both processed products of animal origin and products of plant origin as well. So the plant ingredient must be an integral part of the product and not just added for a flavouring or technical purpose. And the example that I normally give is that if you had something like a canned Irish stew that had different ingredients in, so it was made up of a smaller amount of beef, but also potatoes and perhaps some vegetables, you would class that as a composite product. Whereas if you had a canned beef product that, say, only had a very small amount of onion present as a flavouring, that would remain a processed meat product. So they would need two different export health certificates, and the rules that would apply to them would be different. So you do have to carefully look at, your composite products and decide what category it falls into, or even a product that has perhaps got plant ingredients in may remain, say, a fishery product still or a meat product. So it's looking at that at the outset and making sure you do know which category your product falls in. Next slide, please. There are some exemptions from some sanitary requirements and export health certificate requirements. These are in relation to imports into the UK. Now, obviously, at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, the requirements have been suspended. So we're perhaps thinking of from October forward what those rules may look like. But at the moment, there are exemptions, and that's for things like it's generally shelf-stable ambient products, so things like confectionery with dairy or egg products less than 50%, your bread and cakes less than 20%, pasta and noodles are on there. There is a full schedule list of products that are exempt, and as I say, that generally applies to shelf-stable products as well. There is a general catch-all exemption category. So it's got to be shelf stable, but it's also got to meet some heat treatment requirements as well. So again, when I look back at the advice that we have already provided, this is an area where businesses have asked for assistance and advice in relation to, does their product fall within the exemption? Can it take can it fall in there, and can it be exempt, because the rules are quite complicated. So that is an area where we have offered advice. Next slide, please. And just touching on this is another reason why the composite products are an area where there is some confusion, because in April of this year, the EU actually revised their animal health rules, not only in relation to composite, but in particular composite rules. They actually changed the way that they categorised their composite products. So rather than having specific products, they actually categorised them into 3 different categories, and are looking more on a risk basis around whether products should be exempted or not. So the new categories under the EU rules, the first one is for non-shelf stable composite products. The second category is for shelf stable composite products that contain meat ingredients. And the third one is for shelf stable composite products that don't contain meat products. And as I said, this is where there has been confusion, because we now have that divergence. There's no indication from DEFRA at the moment that they are looking to adopt these rules wholesale, although my contacts with DEFRA, the different questions I've asked, they have indicated that they are looking at reviewing the rules. So from October, we may find that the rules may have changed slightly for imports into the UK. Now, whether those will move closer to these revised rules that the EU implemented, we don't know as yet, and it is something that we're going to have to wait and see. Next slide, please. One of the things that was introduced as a result of the EU changes was that there was a new exemption for those products that were considered as being a lower risk, and there is now a requirement that a private attestation can be used rather than an export health certificate, and products may not need sort of those full physical checks, and may not need to enter a BCP if they fall within these categories. So this would apply to certain shelf stable, again, it's shelf stable, which is the lowest risk, so composite products which don't contain meat ingredients or only contain processed dairy, egg and fish, would only then require the private attestation. The main point of that is that it doesn't need to be signed by a vet officer. So the private attestation basically attests that you meet the certain requirements. So there are some heat treatment requirements for the dairy and the egg that are very specific, quite onerous, because certainly the milk and the egg, it was looking at sterilisation or ultra heat treatment. It was so onerous that the EU actually made an amendment shortly after the new rules were introduced. So they reduced the requirements for the milk heat treatment, because I think they realised that there would be a lot of products that couldn't use the exemption because you didn't often use sterilised milk as an ingredient. So they did move to sort of unloosen the rules really in relation to that. And again, the treatment can be applied to the composite product as an entirety as well. And it could be then that you could use that private attestation rather than the EHC. Next slide, please. As I've already mentioned, there are requirements that products of animal origin that aren't exempt, don't fall within one of the exemptions, must enter the EU via a border control point. So that is obviously already ongoing, and if you're currently exporting to the EU on Northern Ireland, you will know that already. The proposals from the UK government are that those requirements will come into force for imports into the UK in 2022. Difficult to say whether it'll be delayed further, but currently that's what we are looking at. And what happens here is the reason that they come through a BCP is so that those checks, those physical checks and documentation checks can be made at these points to ensure that there's no risk to health, public health, animal health at that point. Do need to be careful that the BCP you're using will actually accept your specific category of product, because some of the BCPs don't accept all categories. And again, you can find the full list of the authorised BCPs, both for the EU and the UK. There are some links there, but if you do need those, I can provide those afterwards. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then in relation to the pre-notification, again, you may have already had experience and may already be using this, but pre-notification for imports into the EU is via the Traces system. Again, that was recently updated to the Traces NT system, but that's really just a pre-notification that your consignment is due to arrive, so that the BCP are ready for that, and you do need to provide that documentation. Your CHED-P document and your EHC on your pre-notification, and it's point of entry within Northern Ireland. Next slide, please. Again, obviously now that we are that third country, there is a new system for pre-notifications for imports into the UK. Again, that's been delayed a couple of times because I don't think the system was ready. I know that DEFRA did run some webinars back in March in relation to the system, to train on the system. I'm assuming, given that they've pushed the date back, that they'll look to run these training sessions again. I know that they were trying to assist businesses in registering and having the training so they knew how to make the notifications. But currently the notifications will need to be made from the 1st of October. And as I say, hopefully the system will be up and running by that point. I did have a quick look yesterday. I couldn't see any notification of any webinars, but I do assume that they'll run a full programme again on the system for people who didn't get a chance to attend in March. And again, there's a link there on, there's quite good information on how to register, and there are some training documents on the DEFRA websites that are quite useful, something I've looked at as well. So next slide, please. So again, just the sort of things that you'll need to attach to the IPAV system with your notification. You've got to have that electronic copy of the EHC attached, but the actual hard copy of the EHC has got to accompany the consignments. So again, it's just that, the actual practicalities of how you do that notification. Next slide, please. And just a mention of, again, the Northern Ireland Protocol and how that impacts on exports to the Northern Ireland. So under the terms of the withdrawal agreement, the protocol that was agreed on Northern Ireland what it means in practice is that products that are sold in Northern Ireland must continue to meet EU rules, and products moving from Great Britain to Northern Ireland would be considered as EU imports. However, products coming back the opposite way, so products moving from Northern Ireland to GB would continue to move freely. Again, I'm sure you're aware that dates have been pushed back and different allowances have been made, because I think the government acknowledged that, you know, things weren't ready to move. There is also an authorised trader arrangement scheme, which does allow trusted suppliers to move some goods without the need for certification from the 1st of October. There's no indication at the moment of that being extended, but obviously we're watching for announcements in relation to that. So you will, if you're moving your composite products into Northern Ireland, you do need to follow those official certification rules and enter via BCP and make those pre-notifications. Next slide, please. I'm sure you've seen the coverage of what was called the sausage wars in the press in relation to imports of raw sausages into Northern Ireland. I don't think it was anything we should have been surprised by, because you know, certainly going back probably 18 months, there was that list of products where we already knew that there wasn't a category of export health certificate, so imports from third countries were not permitted, and this is where this problem's occurred. There isn't actually an export health certificate for import into the EU for the list of products that are there. So your chilled minced meat, your meat preparations, which is where your sausages come in, and also some other products as well. So minced poultry meat, and mechanically separated meat. So there is a list of products where just there isn't an EHC in the legislation, which is why they effectively cannot be imported into the EU, because there isn't a category of export health certificates. So the date's been pushed back in relation to, obviously, I think it's mainly raw meats and sausages, meat preparations that going into Northern Ireland. Obviously, the UK government are looking to reach an agreement. Now, whether that occurs or not, obviously, we'll be watching that with interest to see what happens. But at the moment, all that's happened is the date's been pushed back. Next slide, please. So again, so just some key dates and summaries. I've obviously highlighted, I've contacted the DEFRA. DEFRA have an export and import team. You can ask them direct questions. So I've asked them specific questions on behalf of businesses about heat treatments for particular products and, you know, categories for dairy imports, you know, so some quite specific questions. And I've asked about changes to the rules, what the changes might be, because they have indicated that currently the rules are under review for products of animal origin. So this is in relation to imports into the EU, into the UK. I asked specifically about, well, what will those changes be? They haven't said at the moment, they've just said it's under review. So whether those rules, when they come back into force on the 1st of October, will have changed, we don't know, but obviously we'll be watching that very, very closely. So currently the date is that for imports, the changes will come into force on the 1st of October. So that's when you will need your export health certificates and your pre-notification. For exports, the requirements, as I've said, into the EU, those have been ongoing since the 1st of January, and I'm sure people are getting to grips with that. And then, as we've just mentioned, the authorised trader scheme, currently that is due to end on the 1st of October, unless there is an extension. So again, we'll be closely watching that. Next slide, please. Right, okay.
Thank you very much, Lorraine. That was brilliant information and well worth everybody, including us in e-Customs, keeping in contact with you, because product of animal origin is forever changing, as we're knowing. What I'm going to do today is just give everyone an overview of what we can offer at SGS e-Customs. So once you know your food meets the safety standards, your warehousing of the food meets the required standards, and you have everything you need for product of animal origin, how can SGS help you move your product across borders through the EU and likewise from the EU back to the UK. Next slide, please. As you'll be aware, from 1st January 2021, all customs movements between the EU and the UK now need customs declarations, much as they did for the rest of the world before, but now new to cover the EU as well. This caused loads of problems with additional risk, cost and delays for many companies, lack of knowledge within companies, lack of available staff to be able to carry out these operations, and continually changing rules and regulations and new paperwork have made it an impossible task for many companies to keep on top of and successfully manage the costs. At SGS, to make compliance easier, we have customs solutions available in the UK and all neighbouring EU countries and beyond. We aim to offer a one-stop shop with services ranging from automated if you want to keep control yourself, or completely outsourced if you want SGS experts to take control of this for you. It's all based around our own in-house software solutions to help UK importers and exporters with their Brexit custom declarations. Companies that we've helped so far range from manufacturing, food and drink producers, wholesalers, food and drink importers and exporters, logistics and haulage companies. In fact, every type of business you can think of that moves a product or service into or out of the EU through the UK, we're involved in. Next slide, please. We do this, as you would expect with SGS, from a dedicated team of experts and all technology led. We have 3 offices for customs services in the UK. At the moment, Camberley, Shepton Mallet in Somerset and Middlesbrough, and we're supported by a back office in Poland as well. We've got a dedicated team of customs specialists on hand to ensure that your declarations and related work is completed to the highest standards, minimising delays and bringing certainty to your operations. We try and work where we can to match each business to the right declarant who gets to understand and learn your business and offer you support and information on an ongoing basis, as well as building a good working relationship. We benefit from decades of experience in the EU because the guys in the EU have been doing this for a long time, so we can now capitalise on that in the UK. We've been covering Europe for a long time with certificates of origin, customs consultancy and many more services where we can review trading behaviours, feedbacks on measures available and work with individual customers to tailor the experience to optimize the performance of us and make things easier for them. Everything is technology led. As mentioned before, it's all based on our own platform. The software is known as I2I. In 2019, SGS bought I2I, a company based in Somerset, to begin the e-customs division and give us a good base to stand on from there, and that is constantly being developed and moved forward, which is quite complicated, as you can imagine, with the constant rules changing. And as I say, we have full UK-wide coverage and beyond with our many offices throughout the EU. Next slide, please. So to cover the first offering, our SGS custom software, we have different ranges of software, but the one to focus on today is called eGTA, and it is aimed at those people who want to keep control of their import and export declarations and keep it all in-house. This enables you to self-manage your customs compliance, and the software can be installed on either your own hardware or more commonly via the SGS private cloud, and helps you create import and export declarations. It's modelled on the HMRC Chief system, so if you're familiar with already using the paperwork for that, you'll have no issues with this. It's also already set up to account for the new CDS system that comes on shortly, and is linked to the many port community system providers for rail and seaports around the UK. As I say, this is aimed at those people who want to keep everything in-house, So it's great if you've got somebody who is used to doing customs declarations, used to dealing with HMRC, understands how it works and has the time to do it. If not, then our next offering could be better for you. Next slide, please. This is our customs brokerage service. And as we said before, every shipment now requires export and import declarations as a minimum. There's a lot of other certificates and documents that you need, as discussed previously by my colleagues, and some I'll go into a little bit later. But if you don't have the time or the expertise within your organisation, whether it be a producer of a product or a haulage or logistics company, to do this, then our brokerage team can take this on for you. Using our own I2I software, we become your customs expert. We have brokerage teams in Belgium, Ireland, Netherlands and the UK, and our Benelux teams can also take care of all your declaration needs moving beyond the Netherlands and Belgium, e.g. Germany and further. And we help thousands of companies from SMEs to multinationals all around the world with fast and reliable service. Benefits over and above the software, as well as obviously freeing up your time. We resolve any uncertainties at any ports or with HMRC for you. We ensure that everything is input correctly. And if a random inspection is called for at a port, we take care of that to minimise the delays to you and your clients. We cover taxes via delayed VAT on your importer's behalf, and we interact directly with the community systems providers in the UK to make sure that there's smooth clearance and operation. We also, if you are working right the way through and you want the full service, and we're doing the import declarations for you with one of our EU affiliate companies at SGS, we also work directly with them to make sure that you have a smooth transition for the complete movement of your products. Next slide, please. Now, if you are a logistics or a haulage company, or indeed you operate your own fleet, then you will be fully aware that you now also need transit documentation, T1s and T2s. These are a faster and cheaper way of speeding cargo through borders, and it's good news. It reduces your liability, reduces paperwork, but you do need to have a tool to be able to manage it. Now, our SGS product is called TransitNet. It's a unique web-based tool that lets you, if you choose to, create your own transit documents, T1s or T2s 24/7 without needing to apply for any licenses, and very importantly, without needing to have your own guarantee to cover the liabilities of any unpaid duties. With TransitNet, you use SGS's guarantee, which currently runs in excess of 100 billion euros and is growing all the time as we grow the service throughout the EU. The TransitNet network enables you to open transit documents in over 20 European countries, including the UK and all our neighbouring countries. Again, if you prefer, if you don't have the knowledge or experience or time within your organisation, SGS specialists can do this service for you and complete your transit documentations for you on your behalf. This can also be linked to either the brokerage service or the eGTA software service, so you can have a complete declaration service and transit service all from one organisation, SGS. Please note though, TransitNet is not a freight or haulage service. We do not have any transport facilities. This is purely the system needed to produce the transit paperwork. Benefits of TransitNet: speed and cost. It's faster than cheaper than other transit services. It's accessed digitally, no paper involved. You don't need a guarantee, which is great benefit of this. It provides custom services with advanced information, so they are able to release your trucks quicker. It's traceable to all participants of the movement, so you can see it straight away. And economy, there is no IT infrastructure. It literally is just accessing our software if you do it yourself, or instructing our specialists to do this on your behalf. Next slide, please. And that's me finished. I will just also add that we are working very closely with our other divisions, such as Lorraine. She mentioned product of animal origin. One of the big areas there is health certification and certificates needing to be issued by vets, and there's a gap in the market for that. We're working very strongly and quickly with Lorraine and her team to be able to look at offering that as a one-stop shop, so that you can go to get your product of animal origin advice from us, you can get your food products up to standard, your warehousing to standard with Jeremy's team. You can then speak to us and we can refer you to an approved vet via SGS, and then we can produce your export and or import declarations for you as you need. So the complete one-stop shop. Thank you for your time, and I will now hand you back to Rachel.
Hello, and I hope you enjoyed the webinar. This is just a quick update that we have Academy training to go through the 2020 updates to the Codex for the hazard analysis and critical point and general principles for hygiene. There is a link on this presentation that you can click through to register, which you'll be able to access at the end of this week, beginning of next week. We'll now move on to any questions. And first up, we have one, which is, we are an EGTA user. Do we need to set up on traces like one would with EMCS?
If I take that one, I believe so, but I will refer that to our EGTA team. We'll have your contact details, and one of those will get back to you with support and help on how you do that after this presentation.
Excellent. Next question. How many people on a site have to complete the assessment? This is for the Realise programme.
Okay, thanks. It really depends on the number of people on the site to make a statistically valid assessment. So for a small site of around 30 people or less, then we need every single personnel on site to actually answer that. But as we work up, then there's a sliding scale kind of reducing the percentage of the employee population that we need to assess. So by the time we get to a site with 500 people on, then we probably only need to assess about 20% of the employees. Thank you.
Excellent. So next question. The EU rules for exemptions from veterinary checks for certain composite, let me just get the rest of this. For certain composite products changed in April 2021 for exports to the EU. Are these changes likely to be introduced for imports into GB, Great Britain?
Yeah, I'll answer that one. As I said earlier, the indications at the moment, obviously for GB to follow any of the EU rules now from the 1st of January, we have to now implement our own legislation. So what would need to happen is that we would need to have new legislation which would bring those forward. There's no indication at the moment that they're going to follow the EU, and I think it is unlikely that they'll mirror it, but I think there will be some changes. So, and I'm hoping that we would get to hear about those certainly, you know, by the end of August, because if they're looking at bringing them in by the 1st of October, we really need to know the detail on those. So I don't think they'll mirror the changes exactly, but I think there will be some changes.
Excellent. Next question. We have been using the delayed declarations procedures so far this year, so have not yet sorted any import declarations. Can you help with this?
Yes, most certainly. We have a team of people in place to do that and systems set up for delayed declarations. You're not alone. A lot of companies have done the same. My email address is on the screen now. Please contact me directly, as we would need to move quickly on it. If some of those delayed declarations were from January, the deadline is already gone. So we need to move very quickly on this. So yeah, please get in touch. We can certainly help you.
Excellent. So with regard to the Realise programme, do I need to be registered as a food business operator?
Okay, you really need to check your local authority to see if you actually need to be. Now, typically most cold stores would need to be due to the fact that they're holding sort of temperature controlled items, but it does depend on the type of products you're holding. And also, if you're rewrapping or repacking operations on site, then most likely you would have to. But I'd recommend checking with your local health authority to see if you actually need to be registered, just to make sure you're legally compliant.
Excellent. The sausage gate. Can I still send uncooked sausages to Northern Ireland?
Yeah, so again, covered slightly at the moment, you can, but as I say, unless there is some sort of agreement, you know, on a permanent basis, that will come a stage in the future where those will no longer be permitted, and that would include Northern Ireland and the EU. So unless there's an agreement, which, if I'm completely honest, I think is unlikely, because you know, these imports have not been allowed into the EU from any third country, you know, for a number of years previously. So I don't think they'll make an exemption for GB. So I think it's probably unlikely, unless they make an agreement just for imports into Northern Ireland and not the rest of Europe. All right.
Okay, next question. Can you also help us find a broker for exports, imports to and from our sites based in the EU?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we've direct offices in many of the EU countries that we work with and liaise with, and can certainly introduce you to those. Those where we don't have direct offices, we work with approved partners. So we can get pretty much anywhere and help you with a service across the EU. So yes, we certainly can.
Excellent. Going back to Realise, question, how can you improve culture?
Well, as I think you said, identified, if you can measure your current performance, then you can start identifying where any gaps can be. Now, typically, we're seeing most of the early assessments coming out and identifying gaps in communication. So about how the information is communicated to people and how frequently information is actually communicated to people, making sure that they're aware of their responsibilities and how that actually works. And when we get the final report, then there's included a whole range of hints and tips. So if you score low in a particular area, on how to improve that score and improve that measurement to demonstrate that mature food safety culture.
Excellent. So probably our last question for this morning is coming from, is there any exemption from EHC requirements when sending samples for testing of products of animal origin?
Yeah, it's a good question. There aren't, unfortunately, because I know certainly SGS, you know, initially we did meet with some delays. So even if you're only sending a sample for testing, you still do need to meet the requirements that apply to, you know, bulk imports, exports of products. So no exemption. So it's something that you do need to consider if you're sending any products for testing to a lab in Europe.
Okay, brilliant. I think we'll call it a day now for questions. I'd like to thank everybody for attending. If you do have any further questions for our team and panel today, then their contact details are on this final slide of the presentation. This will be available on demand by the end of the week, and if you do want an actual copy, we'll be able to send you via email a copy for yourselves. So I'd just like to say thank you for attending our webinar, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, and bye-bye.